Hey, it's Carlos. Have you ever been talking with a guy and found yourself wondering, what do I say to this guy? What do I say next? You wonder what to talk about with a guy. I'll be the first person to tell you that talking to a man is really not that difficult. The problem is when, well, basically you only learned how to talk to other girls, and that's what most women have only learned. That's what we're talking about today. I'm talking about what to talk about with a guy. 18 tips. And before we roll into the topic today, make sure you do the big three. Make sure you like and subscribe. Why wouldn't you? It's great stuff. Make sure you, of course, turn on the notifications so you know when next week's video comes out. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below in the comment section. And of course, stick around to the very, very end, the bitter end, because at the end of this video, I've got a little secret tip for you there. You know, we may have a lot of topics that we talk about together, but knowing how to talk with a man and talk about these things with a man is probably more important than what to talk about with him. How you talk to a guy is actually more important. It's just not that easy to know what to talk about with a guy sometimes, right? Aren't you lucky you have Carlos? That's why I'm here. I've been a guy my entire life, I'm pretty sure, and I've gone on quite a few dates where the woman that I was talking to, when she talked to me, she didn't seem to have the first clue about what to talk about or how to talk about it. And now that we live in the age of COVID and online dating, we have to find more ways to make these connections count. Conversation is how more relationships are going to start off. So right now I'm going to give you a crash course on how to talk to men. We're going to talk about what to talk about and how to talk about it. But first, we've got to talk about what not to talk about. First thing you don't want to talk about, negative topics. If you're still in the first 2 to 4 dates in that range, in that zone, like the first month or so, you need to avoid having your conversation go into the negative territory. It basically, if he brings anything up, it's okay, but you don't want to stay there too long. You want to move on to more positive topics. Don't talk about how your life sucks, how his life sucks. Politics, don't ever talk about that. Politics ruins everything. Don't talk about the news. You get the idea. Don't talk about criticism. It should go without saying, that you should not be talking about any kind of criticism about him on those first few important dates. After all, if you're finding things to criticize about him and you feel the need to share it, you probably shouldn't be seeing this guy. Pretty simple, right? Next thing to not talk about. Anyone else you're seeing right now. This is obviously a no-no. There's no need to discuss anybody that you're dating on the side other than him. If he asks you, you can politely delay that topic for later on. Don't talk about any women from his past for a while, at least until you're into a stable relationship of your own and you're also grounded in your own feelings of love and safety. Leave other people out of it. Memories of his past just doesn't belong right now. You are the present, my dear lady. Stay with the present. And of course, don't talk about his money. Look, the truth is, a lot of guys do run into a lot of women that seem to only be looking at him as a source of gifts and support. Every guy understands his obligation to provide for his family, of course, but don't bring up the topic of his money, his salary, or any of that stuff too early. Whether that's talking about how much he makes or how he spends that money, just put it off. You don't need to talk about it. What do you think? Are there other things that you should not be talking about? Leave that down in the comment section below. I'd like to see what you guys think about that. Here's what you should be talking about. Number one, anything you can compliment about him. Look, ladies, the sad fact of the matter is that men don't get enough compliments, at least not the right kind of compliments. You can't compliment a man the way you compliment a woman. He isn't really all that concerned about his choice in shoes or his evening jacket. Does anybody even care about an evening jacket anymore? I don't know where, it's like an old James Bond movie. What a man cares about more than anything else is whether or not he's done something that is worth recognizing. One of the most important things to a man is being approved of. When you give him approval, his heart just sings. So a good compliment is your best starting thing. Talk about this. Number two, talk about his hobbies or his passions. Guys love to talk about their pastimes and their hobbies. After all, there's a good chance he took a job just to pay for his hobbies, and maybe that even developed into his career. So you can talk about his work, but even better, talk about what he would be doing if he didn't have to work at all. In fact, you can ask him that question to find out what is really important to him. You need to know this stuff if you're entertaining the idea of this guy being your one and only someday. Also, make sure you ask intelligent questions about his hobbies. All you have to do is be genuinely interested in him and what he's talking about. Show curiosity and ask questions, and that's a pretty simple recipe to win his heart. Talk about this. Talk about his friends and his family. Look, you want to know more about his world, right? If only to find out if he's actually a good match for you. So the best thing you can do is to ask him about his friends and what makes them all friends. Find out what holds them together, what makes them close, what do they have in common, what activities do they share, how did they meet, what are their differences, what are their personalities like. Questions are your #1 intelligence gathering tool. Make sure you're asking him questions regularly to find out more about him. All right, next thing to talk about is his pets. This is a no-brainer. If he's got a dog, find out about his dog. He'll probably ramble on and on for hours about his dog. I'm just warning you about that because I used to have a dog and I would talk about my dog endlessly. If he has cats, maybe you should rethink this whole thing. Just kidding. We all love to talk about our pets after all, and there's no faster way to open up a person's heart than to awaken the love he has for his cat, his dog, his guinea pig, whatever. Next thing to talk about, find out about his job. Yes, eventually you do need to know what his career is. Why did he choose it? What does he love about it? What does he hate about it? How did he get into that line of work? Is he doing it just for the money? How does his job satisfy him? And of course, talk about your own job. Why did you choose it? You can tell an awful lot about a man by finding out how he came into a certain line of work or the job he's got, and the reasons he gives you for why he chose it. Talk about this, #6, talk about your own turn-ons. I'm talking about your passions here, the things that make you excited about life. A man is also looking to see if you have your own life. He wants to know you're together before he starts a relationship with you. No man wants to be an emotional support system or your sole sense of self-worth. After he talks about his own hobbies, you should talk about your own. You do have hobbies, don't you? Look, make sure you have a life of your own before you start dating. It can be terrifying, terrifying to a guy to think that the only thing going on in your life is the search for a relationship. Now, I can't cover every single one of these tips today because it's a lot of stuff. If you want to see the whole article, of course, go on over to datingfire.com and pull it up there. Next thing to talk about is this. Talk about things you can do together. One of the best ways to get a guy to fall in love with you is to have adventures with him. Do things together that get him emotionally involved. It's this process of experiencing life that actually creates real emotional investment. So pick out a few activities that will get him activated. Maybe he's trying out a new rock climbing gym, or go see a local theater production, or just choose something exciting and that will bring up the level of attraction between you. Next thing to talk about books you're reading. Look, if you find a book that you're both familiar with, it's one of the best ways to get a good conversation going. It's also going to establish some really good common ground. Ask what he found interesting in that book and not so interesting in it. If you're a reader, of course, you want a man who's also a reader, right? So make sure this is high on your list of requirements for your life partner. You do have a list of requirements, don't you? Another thing you want to talk about is food. This one's a no-brainer. Talking about food it's the easiest thing in the world to talk about. Talk about the food you like. Talk about the food you'd like to try. Talk about some of the places you go, your favorite restaurants. What makes them your favorite restaurants? Talk about some of your food adventures from the past. Talking about food is one of the easiest ways to start and keep a conversation going, because the other benefit is that when you start talking about food, there's all these other stories that connect to it, right? He'll be reminded of lots of experiences from his past, and so will you. Next thing you talk about is accentuate your commonalities. Now, this is something about how you talk about things with him. In other words, make sure you talk a lot about things you guys have in common, your compatibilities, and make sure you accentuate those. The more you talk about things that you share with him, the more you're going to create this connection, that feeling of connection with him. And if you really do like this guy, you can't go wrong. Just don't get stuck on a topic, or else it can kind of seem forced. But make sure you stay there long enough to really establish that connection. Later on, talk about love. The best way to get into the topic of love is to explore things like celebrity crushes. Everybody's got a celebrity that they really dig. Another great way to bring it up is to talk about his first real life crush from grade school or high school, middle school, wherever it happened. But gently work in these stories of your past relationships in a way that is not threatening to him, but gets him to talk about his own. By bringing up this topic, you're actually reactivating the same emotions in him that he's felt in the past. He's going to be feeling those feelings of love. Only now, in the present moment, he has to focus them, and he's going to focus them on you. Pretty cool, huh? All right, next thing I talk about is talk about your favorite movies. Now, I'm kind of listing this one twice, but actually it's an important one. When you find out why people like certain movies, you actually find out more about how they think and how they feel. You understand them at a deeper level. That's why this warrants extra attention. Ask him what's in his Netflix queue, or what the last good movie he saw was, what types of movies he generally enjoys, what types of movies he avoids. Bonus points here if you can find a good quote or two from past movies that you've memorized. As you may or may not know, men really love to reuse movie quotes. The reason we do this? It's a way for him to relive the experience of the movie again. And finally, talk about this. Talk about never have I ever. And one of the most fun ways to get in touch with someone is to let yourself be a kid with them again. And one of the best conversation games is to play the never have I ever game. Now, if you've never played it before, the game is super simple. Never have I ever. If you've never played it, what each person does is they hold up a hand, and then one person takes a turn sharing a statement about something they've never done while saying, never have I ever. So for example, they might say, never have I ever rode a motorcycle. And then what's the next thing that happens? If anyone has done that thing, they put their hand down and then they tell a story about when they did do that thing. It's a lot of fun, and it can actually lead to some really wild and interesting conversations. Now, there's tons of crazy lists for this game you can find on the internet, plenty to fuel your conversations for, well, years. In order to keep a man interested, you've got to be able to start conversations that bristle with energy. If you hang back and you try to play things too safe, which is what a lot of women do, you're going to lose before you get started. Don't play to not lose. Play to win. This is a significant difference in strategy. You don't see football players get out there in the field and try to not lose. That's what the defensive team is for. They stop from not losing. The offensive part of the team, they play to win. And that goes for any sport. Look, I've given you plenty of ideas here for what to talk about with a guy. And if you put your mind to it, you can come up with a bunch more. The truth is, you don't really need to know what to talk about. And if that was a question, I just answered it. Really, you don't need to. You are probably wondering how to talk with a guy. What words do you use to talk with him? How do you reach his heart? You see, guys do use different words, different phrases, and we sometimes interpret things a little bit differently. And you might feel like you're fumbling with the right words to use when you talk with men. There is a way to know the right things to say all the time, so you can have simple scripts that you can use to handle any situation with a guy. Now, in my newsletter and in my free ebook that I give you when you sign up, I can show you a lot of this stuff and some of the mistakes you're probably making right now that are, I hate to say it, scaring guys off. Go on over to datingfire.com/Ask Carlos. That's datingfire.com/Ask Carlos. Here's the 1-2 punch that you're going to love. You get to ask me a question, and then you also get my free ebook and my free newsletter for free. For free. It's all free. Look, you got to know the real reasons that men run from relationships. You got to know if he's really still interested in you. You need to know if he's afraid to commit and why he might be afraid. I'm going to give you the 7 mistakes that make men pull away, and I'm going to show you those in my free ebook. So go on over to datingfire.com/Ask Carlos. You can ask a question, or you don't even have to fill in that part of it. Just put it in your email and you get all the good free stuff. Hey, this is Carlos Cavallo. As always, make sure you do the big 3, right? Make sure you like and subscribe. Why wouldn't you? This is good stuff. It's awesome. You can keep getting it every week, and you'll know when you turn on that reminder, that button, that little notification button, the bell indicator, just click that and you'll get on the notifications too. And leave me any questions or comments down below. I love to read those. Tell me what you thought about this. Tell me if you have any suggestions of your own. I'd love to see them. Hey, this is Carlos Cavallo from datingfire.com. As always, live and love with passion. Hey, another really important thing you got to talk about with guys is to talk about his dreams, his goals, and his future. It's especially important that you know what kind of a thinker this guy is. You want to know if he's got a plan for his life. That's why you've got to find out what he thinks he's going to be doing 5, 10, 20 years from now. Even if it's only being a dad or whatever, you have to know what he's thinking about and what he's planning for. The biggest red flag you can encounter with a man is talking to a guy who has no plans for his future. Yeah, it might sound romantic when he says he's just living for the moment, but that's just another way of saying, I'm just treading water. I'm just basically idling here. You need a guy who is forging a path forward, not stagnating.